Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. This time I want to talk about Bandai's recent design philosophies and how I feel like they've really been improving the game since set 5. Set 5 was kind of the last set where I felt like we had some really big issues with design flaws. I mean, since set 5 we had Clash of Fates in set 6, and in those sets I really haven't seen anything that's really caused me alarm. You know, a few cards here and there, but really far few in between. The biggest one that comes to mind is Super Shenron, and Bandai has already addressed that, so I'm really happy about that. But before we get into the discussion video, guys, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you guys can stay up to date with all the awesome Dragon Ball Super content that I post here. So what I basically want to talk about is how I feel like Bandai's recent design philosophy has basically improved the overall health of the game. We still have a few issues with some older cards, and I'm not saying the meta is in any way warped. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. There's no problem with the meta game. There's no problem with the game in general. No big glaring issues outside of like a few unfair cards that I personally don't like. I know a lot of people don't like them, but they're not broken. They're beatable. They're very, very beatable. This is just a discussion, something I've been thinking about a lot. I actually made a post on the Facebook group yesterday talking about this, where I feel like Bandai's design philosophy has gotten so much better. So I kind of want to talk about the design philosophy that I kind of know them to have as a Japanese-based game trading card game designer company in general, and you know, the way I think they're shifting going forward. So as far as I know, with like Japanese-based companies that design card games, with my experience in Dragon Ball as well as what I've kind of heard and researched for Bandai, Japanese card game players and that kind of culture, they enjoy a much more fast-paced game. They enjoy things where a lot of things are happening, a lot of attacks are being done, a lot of actions are taking place, and games end rather quickly. So I guess that's the way their culture is, and they just enjoy the card game like that. A lot of times when that's happened in the Dragon Ball Super card game and in the other card games that I've played, American card game players have had issues with that. They don't enjoy that. Usually we enjoy grindier games. We don't want to feel like we've auto won. We want an actual interactive game between our opponent back and forth. That's at least the stereotypes that I've come to know as a card game player in America, and that's, like I said, the stuff I've found researching what a card game culture is like in Japan and overseas. So with that being said, it's no surprise that Bandai's design cards like Mecha Frieza, design cards like Shugesh, design cards like Gogeta 7, design cards like Height of Mastery. A lot of these cards that kind of promote really high octane, really fast gameplay, playing a lot of battle cards per turn, getting really aggressive, as well as boss monsters that just come down and win the game. You know, on Gogeta 7, it's the turn 5 case. Height of Mastery now with Path to Greatness, it's like a turn 4 case. So ignoring the Mecha Frieza, Shugesh aggressive part of it, you know, where you can make a lot of plays really fast. In this video, I want to talk about how there's been a lack of barrier and a lack of deflect on very recent card text, which I'm super ecstatic about. I think it's an excellent stride for balance and progress in this game, but I want to talk about kind of the roots of where that's come from and how I think it's changed and why I think it's changed. So like I said, guys, if you look at cards like Gogeta 7 real quick, we're not even going to read the effect, we're just going to look at the keywords. We're going to look at Triple Strike, Union Fusion, Barrier, Deflect. So those are, you know, 4 pretty big keywords that let you cheat things in, they let you get big attacks, they let you, you know, protect the boss monster, things like that. And then the other effect, obviously everybody knows, Sparking 10, crit a life. If you have 5 or more energy, your opponent shuffles their hand back into the deck and draws 3 cards. Height of Mastery, very similar. It doesn't have barrier, but it does have deflect, so you can't affect it with counterplays. Triple Strike, dual attack, so it comes down. It usually will win the game the turn it comes down. Auto, when you play this card with swap, you can tap out 3 of your opponent's energy or battle cards, ignoring barrier. So these are boss monsters, right? We all know what kind of boss monsters are. Like, they're just big dudes that your deck usually revolves around. You bring them down, you hope to win the game with them, right? And that's all fine and dandy. I'm all for boss monsters. I do enjoy particular boss monster strategies. I really do enjoy playing green yellow Broly, but in my opinion that deck is much more fair, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. But I think this video is going to surmise pretty well what the issue a lot of players have, myself included, with things like Gogeta 7 and Height of Mastery. It's that there's that uninteractivity aspect to them. Basically the deflect. In Gogeta 7 it also has the added on barrier, but these cards were a product of Bandai's old design philosophy, at least their Dragon Ball Super card game team. That old design philosophy where we just want a card that comes down late game. I mean, you know, quote unquote late game being turn 4 in our case, because our game does go pretty fast compared to other games. I want this boss monster that comes down turn 4, turn 5 and just wins the game. Your opponent has no say about it, and we want the game to be over by that turn. We want something really fast and powerful to happen, and I think that's a product of their old design philosophy. And I think Bandai is amazing for one reason, if not anything else, is that they really take the feedback of the community. I mean, we see these polls all the time. We see the surveys all the time that Bandai puts out into the community, just asking for our feedback, and it's really excellent. I love that. It's one of my biggest turn-ons for this game, is that I feel like the company that makes the game really does care about the player in that sense, and they really care about the health of the game, because I know the business model for a trading card game, you know, basically whenever you make a trading card game that sells popularly, like Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, like it's super cheap to produce, so you're printing money essentially. And I know a lot of companies can take advantage of that. You know, personal experience, I know Yu-Gi-Oh took huge advantage of that. They would just literally print a set. All the money cards were going to be the good cards you needed to pick up, so you had to pick up $60 play sets, $100 play sets, even more expensive sometimes. Right now there's a $100 play set in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I've heard stories about other card games taking the same advantages of their players. And a lot of times it leads to uninteractive gameplay, and in the case of Konami, it really always felt like they never really cared about the gameplay and the player base as much. But the one thing I get from Bandai is that they really do care about the player base, and they really care about the player experience. And we see that all the time in their ban list announcements. You know, they always refer to a gameplay experience and player experience, and I really do appreciate the fact that they do that. So I think they've really taken our advice going forward, and going forward I haven't seen much of Deflect or Barrier on anything that didn't really deserve to have Barrier. You know, sometimes I think of cards that I have listed here that should have Barrier, a few that I'll talk about in a minute, and cards that don't have Barrier, that don't need Barrier, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we have some of the cards from Bandai's old design philosophy. We've got Gogeta 7, we've got Head of Mastery. They basically come down and they just win the game on the turn they're played typically, right? And my main issue with these cards is not that they're broken or unbeatable. Again, please don't misconstrue what I'm trying to say here. That's not the case at all. My main issue with them is that they push slower decks out of the format, because if you don't do anything meaningful to these decks, to Height of Mastery or to Gogeta 7 decks, before they drop their boss monster, if you let them get there unscathed, they basically will automatically win the game, unless you have like the ultimate counter to the card, like a certain type of negate or some type of thing that gets your own counterplay. I mean, we are getting that Mutaito card with the World Tournament Power Booster, which is going to help a lot against these cards in particular. But I think of a strategy like Mono Red Frieza Prison, right? Like that deck's really, really cool. It's the first actual control deck we have in the game. It does a lot of controlling things with its negates, with its boss monster, things like that. But if you are playing that deck and you get height dropped on you, or you get Gogeta 7 dropped on you, especially Gogeta 7, you really can't win the game. And there's a lot of other slow decks that want to grind out. Like we have, like, I think of something like Lemon Lime Frieza, that it's not going to kill you in the first 4 turns or first 5 turns typically, unless you're self-awakening really hard. But it wants to set up a board, it wants to, you know, remove the opponent's resources, it wants to control the board. And these types of decks just really push out those long grindier decks that typically Americans enjoy playing, at least from my experience. Obviously we have Americans that enjoy playing aggro, we have Americans that enjoy playing control, mid-range. That's all going to change, and that's all going to vary, you know, player to player. But like personally myself, I know a lot of other players like enjoy the Lemon Lime Frieza deck, and it's a really hard deck to play right now because of a deck like Gogeta 7 or a deck like Height of Mastery. So, and granted, Lemon Lime Frieza does have counters to something like Height of Mastery with Time Magic, but a little bit harder to counter Gogeta 7 when it says get rid of your entire hand and draw 3 random cards, and you can't negate me unless you're playing, you know, Red Frieza swap, right? And again, that Red Frieza swap can even be baited out. So those are cards I feel like don't deserve Barrier, don't need Barrier. The Barrier is actually fine. It's actually Deflect that's probably the biggest issue. But now I want to talk about some of the more recent cards that have come out and why I think that Bandai's design philosophy has been excellent so far. Broly Power Unleashed and Broly Limit Transcended. Let me just say, if these cards had Barrier, I think this deck would probably be tier 0, as funny as it sounds. But I've been on record saying this tons and tons of times. The green yellow Broly deck, the Broly starter deck engine, that whole thing is incredibly fair for a few reasons. You know, the leader is designed to be incredibly fair. You can only ever draw back up to 6 cards after discarding a bunch. You have to, you know, target a dude on your board and your opponent's board to activate its effect. You can't control more than 2 battle cards. There's tons of reasons why that leader is very fair, but one of the big reasons is that the battle cards themselves do not have Deflect or Barrier. You know, they do have the protection from Mafuba, but I think that's totally fine. This fact that they can be bloodlusted, the fact that they can be crushable, the fact that they can be popped by basically any form of removal is incredibly fair, and they're super powerful. You know, they kind of fall in line with Bandai's old design philosophy in the sense that they come down really early and really impact the game, but they're not unbeatable by any sense of the word. Any generic removal can deal with them, any counterplays can deal with them, and I really like the fact that these cards, you know, are set up like this. Now, a few other things where something does have Deflect and I'm sort of okay with it. In all honesty, I kind of wish they would get rid of the keyword Deflect just in general. I don't think it needs to exist in the game because it just promotes uninteractive gameplay, and I think the majority of players would say they prefer interactive gameplay, or at least a chance to interact with the opponent rather than just playing a card that automatically wins the game. But the 7-drop Announcer, Witness of History, coming out in the World Tournament Power Booster, I think is actually a much more fair, or at least a much more warranted example of Deflect, because it's super overcosted, right? It's a 7-drop and it has Deflect. Auto, when you play this card, if your leader cards are World Tournament, shoot up to 8 World Tournament cards from your hand with different names that aren't Announcer cards and play them. In my opinion, this is a much more fair card to put Deflect on, and even if you look at something like Height of Mastery, like this announcer card is tied to its archetype. Your leader has to be World Tournament, and Height of Mastery is not tied to anything in particular. Even if you're going to print something super powerful like Height of Mastery and give it Deflect, if you want to do that, tie it to an archetype, make it very restricted, and that's one of the biggest reasons I always said you can put Bardock the Progenitor, it can be unbanned, but it has to be restricted to lineage leaders, because when you put such a powerful main deck with a subpar leader, I think it's a lot more balance of a deck. Height of Mastery in a regular lineage leader is a lot more unimpressive than it is with like Super Shenron or regular Shenron or Broly, Yellow Broly. Not getting that extra attack with Height of Mastery, or not getting those extra 3 attacks with Height of Mastery, seems to make it a lot more balanced in my opinion. But that's kind of neither here nor there. That's maybe a topic for another video, but just a little bit, my little 2 cents on that. Now these are 2 other cards where I think Barrier is a little bit more warranted, and there's a few other cards I think Barrier is warranted on, like something like the Hellfighter 17 that goes into the Super 17 chain. That's a little bit more warranted to give Barrier to, because it does kind of go into a chain and it's not unoutable. But these are the 2 other cards that came to mind when I was thinking about this video. So Mercenary Tao, the Ruthless Trainer. And this is something I think a lot of people will disagree with me on, but I'll put it out there anyway. Mercenary Tao is a 2-drop black battle card. It's got Barrier. Permanent, if your opponent's leader card is green or yellow, reduce energy cost of this card in your hand by 1. Auto, once per turn, when a card in your hand is placed in your drop area by opponent's skill, your opponent chooses 3 cards in their hand and sends them to the warp. This card has Barrier, and I think it's slightly warranted. Only for one real reason. Green does have outs to Barrier, and it has a 2-drop outs to Barrier. And hand control in this game can get a little bit degenerate, especially when you think about things like Cell Chain. Even Slug, honestly, when it gets like unimpeded, if you have no absolute out to it and your deck just can't deal with its board, you're going to have a really rough time against hand control. But that's, like I said before, that deck has a main deckable out to Barrier that kills any 2-drop or less. That's the double impact Krillin. So this is something that I think warrants a little bit more Barrier. Plus, there's still interactivity to it. You have to be playing against hand control for this card to be viable, and it can be Cold Bloodlusted, it can be Crusher Balled if you want to attack it, things like that. So this card is a little bit more warranted in my opinion. And then another card I have is Son Goku Spirit Forger. Now this card may never ever see competitive play. We don't know. We can't necessarily see the future of the game from this point. But this is a card that has Barrier because it takes a lot of turns of build up to actually do something relevant. So this is a 2-drop that you want to play early, usually with Fountain Spirit or just hard casting it, and you want it to sit on the board. You don't want your opponent to easily answer it, because if you're investing all these resources into this card, which this card is very resource intensive, you want to give it a little bit of protection, right? So this card has Barrier. Permanent, this card gains plus 5,000 power for each card you place under it, and you can only play battle cards that are blue and no other color. So right then and there, that restriction even gives it more of a warrant to have Barrier, because it's even more restrictive like that. Activate main once per turn. Place a card from the top of your deck under this card. If 7 or more cards are placed under this card gains triple strike for duration of the turn. So again, this is like a super resource heavy card. A lot of investment takes place to get this thing off, to get triple strike plus however much you want to give it in attack points. So yeah, the thing is with Gogeta 7 and Height of Mastery, like I mentioned before, basically they're too generic and they don't have any real drawbacks, except for Gogeta 7 critting a life, but that's not really a drawback when it comes down and automatically wins the game. And again, please, for the 3rd time, these are not unbeatable decks, not unbeatable strategies, not unbeatable cards, but I think this is where the design philosophy of Bandai is going in the positive direction. I really like how they're straying away from Deflect. I really like how they're straying away from Barrier, unless a card really seems to need it. I think that Bandai is taking a much more analytical look at the way they're developing and designing cards, and I'm a really big fan of it. It makes me really positive for the future of this game, and it makes me love this game even more, because I feel like the company that prints the game is really taking our thoughts and our wishes and our desires into account. No pun intended. So let me know what you guys think about this video. What do you guys think about the future design philosophy of Bandai? Are you enjoying how they're printing the game? Are you not enjoying it? Let me know in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. If you're looking for a Dragon Ball Super community, check the Discord in the description below. And finally, guys, if you're looking for some competitive content, check out the Patreon in the description below. Lots of competitive stuff there. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.